All right, thanks to Gary Davis for sitting in for the past couple of weeks. Here we are back with a brand new edition of Tracks of My Years, and taking us on his rather special 10-song journey this week is one of Radio 2's own, the legendary DJ and broadcaster Johnnie Walker. Across this week on the station, we're celebrating Radio 2's specialist music programmes, which leads me to Johnnie, who has not one but two specialist music shows, The Rock Show and Sounds of the 70s, as well as his many documentaries here on Radio 2. Over the next hour, Johnnie will be taking us through his remarkable career from DJing in the Palace of Versailles to being out in The Boat That Rocked on the pirate ships before making his way onto Radio 1 and 2. I'm really looking forward to this Tracks in My Ears. No doubt some fascinating stories. So kicking us off, it's a jukebox favourite of Johnnie's, the Shirelles, and Will You Love Me Tomorrow?
Tonight you're mine completely.
A great tune, an iconic tune. Why have you chosen that one?
Well, when I was 16, I decided I wanted to buy a reel-to-reel tape recorder. And so I did a summer job in a factory in Birmingham. And at lunchtime, I used to go down the road to the cafe, tiny little cafe. I remember egg, beans and chips and a slice of bread, cup of tea, 1 and 9pence. And fortunately, I often had a 6pence, a tanner to put in the jukebox. And I always used to choose that one. It's a classic pop song, Carole King, Jerry Goffin's song. When they were recording it, the person doing the string arrangements didn't turn up. And so Carole said, well, I'll have a go. First time she'd ever done string arrangements, and she did them beautifully.
You're great at telling stories, and let's be honest, you know, you've been on the radio for quite a while, so you've got great anecdotes and great tales, and your journey on the air, and it's all there for us to go back and listen to. You must be quite proud of everything that you've achieved.
I don't think about the past too much, really. I just need to struggle to get through today. It's amazing, though, the memory thing about the older you get. You can't remember recent stuff, but if something jogs your memory about years gone by, it's kind of all there.
You said that you put this tune on the jukebox on a regular basis by the Shirelles. Would you say that this tune and this style of music has influenced you in any way, because you are synonymous with rock and roll?
Well, it was the beginning of a love of American pop music, and that is just a classic pop record. Beautifully produced, beautifully sung, a great song.
Yeah, so Johnnie, as a DJ, did you start in clubs prior to radio?
Well, I used to go as a punter to a pub midway between Birmingham and Stratford-upon-Avon. It was called the Navigation Inn, and they had this old hall attached to the side of the pub. And Friday and Saturday nights, they'd have record sessions, and people used to come for miles because the DJs managed to get hold of really good soul, R&B imports, stuff you'd never hear anywhere else. And I remember there's a couple of songs that stand out from that era. One was Otis Redding's Respect, and this next choice of mine, Wilson Pickett in the Midnight Hour, and the driving force of the beat in the record and the power of the horn players. I just loved it. And I just thought right there, somehow, somewhere, I'm going to earn my living involved with music. I don't know in what way it's going to be, but that's what I want to do.
And would you pinpoint that as the start of your love and obsession of rock and roll music?
Yeah. Really, what I later discovered was what I loved the most was being on the radio and sharing music with people. It starts in clubs when you're trying to keep the dance floor full. And to have people go home after having had a great night of dancing, it's a good feeling.
It's so funny how that one sentence that you just said is still the main point, I guess, of why DJs are so good at their jobs. You've got to keep the dance floor full. You know what I mean?
Yeah, have you done your bit in the past?
I have indeed, yeah. I go to a venue with an idea of what I want to do, and then you look at the crowd and they dance at some tracks that you didn't think they'd dance to, and they don't dance to some tracks that you did think they would dance to. So it's then up to you as a DJ to keep the dance floor full.
Yeah. And you can always fade one out early. I did an amazing gig. In fact, my last public DJ gig in the Palace of Versailles, of all places.
Wow!
Yeah. We were in the Orangery, and there was a company there celebrating their 25th anniversary, and they organised an evening of entertainment. They had Michael McIntyre, Jules Holland and the Rhythm and Blues Orchestra, and I was on the decks. And I didn't start till midnight, which I was really worried about. I normally go to bed about 10 o'clock these days. How am I going to stay awake till midnight and do a DJ show? And I put on James Brown, Get On Up, I Feel Like Being a Sex Machine. Didn't happen. And then the more records I played, my wife Tiggy said, whatever you do, don't play that. Like Chubby Checker, Let's Twist Again.
Oh, yeah.
Went down brilliantly. Bill Haley and the Comets, Rock Around the Clock, then went down. And then Rolling Stones, Satisfaction. So, I managed to stay awake till 1 o'clock to do the gig.
And did you stay in the Palace of Versailles that night? Or did you go back into Paris?
We stayed actually in Versailles, but not in the Palace, in a hotel nearby.
Lovely. I
mentioned the Navigation Inn. I eventually managed to get a DJ job there. So it was a humble little beginning. So from the Navigation Inn, that tiny grotty pub, to the Palace of Versailles, it's quite a good journey.
It really is. So let's play this then. This is Wilson Pickett and In the Midnight Hour. It's the wonderful Wilson Pickett on one of Johnny's favourite dance floor fillers in the midnight hour. Now, it's a Four Top song. It's not the obvious one. It's Same Old Song. That's a big tune by the Four Tops, Johnny.
Yeah, not one of their most well-known ones, you know. Reach Out and I'll Be There was huge. I remember in 1964, I think it was, Paul McCartney came back after the Beatles had been to America, raving about this record that was all over the radio in New York. The Four Tops, Baby I Need Your Lovin'. What a great record that is. But that one, It's the Same Old Song, was the first record I ever played as a DJ, and that was in the Locarno Ballroom in Birmingham. And I went to the manager there and I said, I'm an experienced DJ, I'd love to work here. And he said, I've no openings at the moment. So I went back to see him. I went every Friday night for 3 months. He used to hide from me. I used to go to the office. I said, is the manager here? No, we don't know where he is. Anyway, I always used to find him and nag him. So eventually, to get rid of me, he said, OK, you start Friday night in the Bally High bar, this Hawaiian-themed bar. And I remember the first night, so I only had one turntable. So I had to keep up a bit of patter while I changed the record. And then I saw the manager standing in the doorway, come to clock how I was doing. I thought, I'd better start. So that first ever talking in the microphone to people, I think was the most nerve-wracking thing I ever did. And that was the first record I played.
Good memories?
Yeah, great memories. Great memories. And at the end of the night, when you'd finished, then you had to clear up the glasses and help sweep the floor and stuff like that. That was Mecca, getting their money's worth. I think it was about 28 shillings for the night.
I can't imagine any DJ that we know today doing a set and then, hanging around till the very end, till the doors close, and then picking up the glasses and the empties.
Yeah. And it was going around the clubs. There was a great club scene in London back then. The Bag of Nails Club. I remember talking to Brian Jones one night in there. The Speakeasy was a legendary place. They had this lovely glassed-in restaurant called the Greenhouse, and you'd see Ahmet Ertegun there chatting to John Lennon and McCartney and Eric Clapton. Jimi Hendrix played there once. Chaz Chandler said, Eric, I wonder if, we've got a guitarist over here from America. His name's Jimmy. I wonder if he could get up and join you on stage. He said, yeah, sure, man. So Jimi Hendrix gets on stage with Eric Clapton, totally blows him away. Eric comes off, says to Chaz Chandler, why didn't you tell me he was that good? I think that's what helped music become so great in the 60s and 70s, was the competitive nature of it. The Rolling Stones and the Beatles were all vying with each other and worried about releasing albums on the same day. But together, they were, very good friends. They got on really well. They were very good days.
Nice. Well, you've chosen another tune for today, Tuesday, from Simon and Garfunkel, and this is Sounds of Silence. Why have you picked this?
Because that was one of the first records I played on the radio. I had an ultimatum from my garage manager in Birmingham. I was a car salesman. And
selling what kind of cars? Just remind us.
BMC it was, Morris, Austin, Wolseley, that sort of thing. MGs. Everybody who bought an MGB, I was terribly jealous of them. I wanted one. But anyway, I was doing DJ work in the evening. I was getting into work sometimes a bit late, half asleep. And eventually the manager called me in on Friday night and he said, one man cannot serve two masters. You're either going to be a proper car salesman available to see customers in the evening, or you're going to do this disc jockey nonsense. I'll give you 2 weeks to think it over. I said, I don't need 2 weeks. I'll tell you now. I'll be a disc jockey, thank you very much. So I said, you want me to work a week's notice? He said, no, you can go now. Give me the keys to your car. So that was that.
And then where did you go from there, once you'd handed the keys over?
Well, I got home. My dad said, where's the car, son? I said, I haven't got it, Dad. You haven't smashed it up, have you? They always think the worst, parents. No, I haven't got the car. I haven't got a job, in fact. I walked out tonight. Oh, what are you going to do now? And all this sort of stuff. And I just thought quickly, I said, well, I'm either going to hitchhike around the world or I'm going to become a pirate radio disc jockey. So that went down really well. I was impressed with that, of course.
Parents love a pipe dream.
Yeah. Next day, Saturday, Daily Mirror ran an article about a new pirate station called Radio England. And somebody came up to me at that pub, Navigation Inn, and said, had I read the Daily Mirror about this new pirate station? I said, yeah. He said, why don't you apply for a job? And I never thought of applying for a job because it intimated they were all going to be American DJs. He planted a seed. Monday morning, I rang the Daily Mirror, found out where they were, recorded a demo tape Monday night. Tuesday, I thought, I won't put it in the post. I'll take it down to them, which I did. Knocked on the door, Suite 1017, Hilton Hotel, Park Lane. I said, I'm Johnnie Walker. I've come from Birmingham to give you my tape. So I opened the door and said, welcome to Radio England. So I was out of work for one day, really. It was amazing the way it happened.
What a brilliant story. And then whilst you were on the ships, I've got to ask you loads of questions. Whilst you were out in the middle of the ocean, how did you get the records? Did people fly them in? Did you row in? How did you get to the station, to the boat?
Well, the brilliant thing was, in the early days, prior to the law coming in 1967, we had a daily supply ship.
Right.
Called the Tender. The Tender would come out, it would supply the ship with generator oil, food supplies, all that sort of thing, and bring the records that were sent down from Caroline House in London. And despite the bosses of record labels like Sir Joseph Lockwood doing everything they could to put the pirates off the air, his promotion department were running around to Radio Caroline several times a day with half a dozen copies of every new release. So they went straight out to the ship. So that's how we got the records.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come of silence.
From Wednesday morning, 3 a.m, the legendary album by Simon and Garfunkel, that was The Sound of Silence, one of the first records Johnnie ever played on the radio. And coming up next is a track Johnnie was bound to be tempted to play, given his pirate radio history. It's Caroline by The Fortunes.
Just me and Caroline.
Radio England never became very successful. It was very badly organised, had a terrible spot on the dial, awful signal. And so after about 4 or 5 months on Radio England, I managed to get a job over on Radio Caroline, which was so different. The Radio England ship was so uncomfortable, it was awful. We slept on sleeping bags on the floor. The Caroline ship, Mi Amigo, very small, beautifully fitted out. And, you know, it was the first one. It was Radio Caroline. And when the Fortunes wrote this song, just about a girl, nothing to do with the radio ship, but the moment we heard it out there, everybody thought, well, this is our theme tune. This is fantastic. And the aforementioned, mentioned him yesterday, Sir Joseph Lockwood, head of EMI, immediately banned the record. So it would have been a huge hit, I think, but you just couldn't buy it in the record shops. But we played it when we went on air in the morning and last thing at night, and it's just synonymous with pirate radio.
And did you build a reputation on Radio Caroline for yourself as, you know, a guy who loves his music, a great disc jockey? Were people becoming more aware of you as a disc jockey on Caroline?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, all the DJs on the pirate ships, they all made themselves a reputation. And I remember as a kid in Birmingham hanging a long wire outside the window to be able to pick up Caroline and Radio London, and listening to Kenny Everett and Kenny and Cash and Dave Dennis and these sort of people. I just thought they were all great. And on Radio Caroline, I got an evening show, 9 to midnight. And during the day, radio tends to be more of a background thing. But at night time, people have chosen to listen to the radio. So I love to play music. I had a thing called 10 o'clock turn on. I played 2 great soul records in a row. 11 o'clock, I used to do this good night thing too. I'd pick a letter from a listener and play Percy Sledge, Warm and Tender Love. And I loved the freedom. The only format we had was one in, one out. In being a record from the Caroline Top 40, out being anything you like.
Oh, really?
Yeah, an album track, an oldie, whatever it is.
So you got free plays?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was great. It was great freedom. It was brilliant.
Is there a band that you're really proud of championing from the early days of their careers? Is there one band where you think, well, I played them really early and they went on to great success?
Well, I suppose the Eagles and Steely Dan, artist-wise, would be Lou Reed, I think, because I picked Walk on the Wild Side for my record of the week, and caused a bit of controversy. The Daily Mail said, why isn't this record banned? Why are Radio 1 playing this record? And producers listened to it. My executive producer listened to it over and over. He couldn't see anything wrong with it, really. I had to get a younger person in to explain the nuances of some of the lyrics. But it's such a cool record. Such a great record.
Did you meet Lou Reed? Did you hang out with Lou Reed?
Yeah, I did. I met him, interviewed him 2 or 3 times. It was quite difficult. He was notoriously difficult interviewee. Lou Reed came in on a drive time show one afternoon, and we were chatting, and I started asking about, I realised, ask stuff nothing to do with music. And it was ridiculous about whether you like fizzy water or still water, I think, just to open him up and break the ice a bit. And he was quite good. And then he said my career was in a bit of a dumper after the Velvet Underground. He said, I released one album, that stiffed. He said, and then I did another album. And he said, some DJ in Europe started playing Walk on the Wild Side over and over again. So I said, yeah, that was me. He goes, you're kidding me. He said, that was you, Johnnie Walker. After all these years, I finally meet the person who did. He said, I think you owe a percentage. You paid my rent for many years. So after that, of course, we were great buddies.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Nice. We're going to move on to this next track, Layla, by Derek and the Dominos.
Radio Caroline comes to an end March 68. I'm out of work. I'm driving trucks and vans for a living. And I later found out that a memo went round the BBC. On no account must anybody employ Johnnie Walker for at least a year after his last pirate broadcast to, quote, let the taint of criminality subside.
Tell me you've got that memo in a frame somewhere.
No, I never seen it. Just heard about it. Dear old BBC. So April 69, I start with Radio 1 Saturday afternoon when they try new people out because they thought nobody's listening. They're all into sport. I think my first show was Cup Final Day, so there's definitely nobody listening. And then they gave me a daily show, 1 hour, following Tony Blackburn at 9 o'clock and preceding Jimmy Young at 10. So I remember I got the album, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, Derek and the Dominos. I put it on at home, and I heard that track, Layla. If you can imagine hearing it for the first time, the power and the sound of those guitars was like nothing like anything I'd heard before. And I thought, gotta play that on the radio. Took it into the producer next day, said, gotta play this. This is unbelievable. Can't play that? I go, why not? Too heavy for the housewives. Can't play that. If you play that, you'll get fired. I'll make sure you get fired. So I didn't play it. Oh, it's my one regret. I should have champed because I don't think they would have fired me over.
No.
It was over a year before it finally came out as a single and became a rock classic.
Oh, what a shame.
What do you do when you found it?
A record banned by the BBC at the time. That was Layla by Derek and the Dominos. You're listening to a very special edition of Tracks of My Year, celebrating a week of all the many and varied musical programmes that we can get to listen to on Radio 2. Joining me is a host of 2 of them, Johnnie Walker, who treats us to the rock show on Friday evenings and sounds of the 70s on Sunday afternoons. Falling just outside that remit, though, it's the Beatles and All You Need Is Love. Of everything the Beatles have done, why have you picked All You Need Is Love?
Well, it goes back to the pirate era of August 14th, 1967, and a new law that the Labour government had brought in, called the Marine Offences Act, came into being, and all the pirate stations closed down. Radio London closed down 3 o'clock that afternoon. It was a very sad day for an awful lot of people. But Caroline decided we would keep going, we'd defy the government. So at midnight, I made the announcement, we'd keep going, and first record we played after midnight was Beatles' All You Need Is Love, because Can't Buy Me Love by the Beatles was first record Caroline had played, so it was suggested by the boss, Ronan O'Reilly, that would be a good record to play.
Nice. Did you meet all of the boys, the Fab Four, in your swinging 60s days?
I'd love to have met John Lennon, never did. I've met Ringo and Paul briefly, but I remember there was the movie The Boat That Rocked. They had a fantastic premiere in Leicester Square, and then there was a party afterwards, and I was at the party, and there was Paul McCartney with his wife Nancy, just standing on their own. And I thought I should go up and say hello, but I was too nervous.
Oh, Johnny, no!
So just when I plucked up courage to go and say hello, Frank Skinner had moved in and was chatting away. And then I interviewed Paul sometime later, and I said, I really regret not coming up to say hello. He goes, why didn't you? I said, I was too nervous. He said, don't be so ridiculous, you know. It's a very down-to-earth guy.
Yeah, nice fella. When you were at Radio 1 and when you were, so off the back of Caroline and then into Radio 1 and then your career blossomed from that moment, did you go to a lot of gigs? Did you see a lot of live music?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I was desperate to keep up with what was going on. So I went to loads of gigs. I saw Bob Marley and the Wailers live at the Lyceum, an amazing gig. I read all the music papers, cover to cover. I listened to every single that was released. I listened to albums. But then, having done all that work, because I was just interested, and I wanted to find something new to share with the listeners, then I would have the production people at Radio 1 saying no. As a DJ on Radio 1 then, we were only allowed to pick one record a week, our record of the week. And the playlist meeting would decide all the other stuff. And these, bless them, these lovely people, they were BBC chaps and chapasses, and they lived in Bromley and Orpington. They never had a record. I don't believe half of them had a record player at home. They never went to gigs. They never read the music papers. And yet they were deciding what young people should hear.
Interesting.
So, although I loved being at Radio 1, there was great frustration, having had the freedom on the pirate stations.
What was the American influence on UK rock and roll like at the time when you were at Radio 1? Was there a lot of American bands being played?
Yeah, I mean, I used to love to play album tracks on my Radio 1 show, and I'd play, the Americanized version of Fleetwood Mac. Another band I was the first to play with the Eagles. And I couldn't believe that first album contained so many great tracks, including Take It Easy as a track I could have picked. And I read the sleeve notes and saw that it was recorded in Barnes in southwest London. I thought, hang about, I thought, this is California rock at its finest, recorded in Barnes. I think music that crosses the Atlantic has an appeal added to it. Like the Americans loved The Who, loved the Stones. We loved Steely Dan. We loved, those American bands. And so I'd play those, and that's really what ended my career with the Beat then was, Johnnie, we'd love you to stay here for another 2 years. We'll give you another 2-year contract. No more album tracks. So I thought, well, that removes a big interest of mine. Of bringing new music to people's attention. And often an album track would later be released as a single anyway. But so then I decided to go to America for a bit.
And you've chosen Steve Miller, The Joker, which I think everyone my age knows that tune so well. Because it was on a jeans commercial.
Yeah. I've always loved the record. I love the sort of sentiment of the record. And my wife, Tiggy, said, that's a record of who you were before you met me. Which has a certain amount of truth to it. But it's become really a sort of, in a way, like Dwayne Eddy, Because They're Young was my signature tune in the 60s, and this, in a way, is sort of like a signature record of mine for the 70s.
And that transition from, the flower power, the hippie era, 68 to 70, and then the transition of music took a am I right in saying a darker turn in the 70s with the way that rock music became heavier? We had the evolution of punk rock, the angst of young people, but yet on the flip side we had disco and all that evolution of dance music, I guess.
I mean, that's what makes doing a show like Sounds of the 70s on a Sunday afternoon so fascinating, because there's so many different styles of music in that decade. I mean, when the Rolling Stones played Altamont in America, which was a concert marred by terrible violence from Hell's Angels, and people said that was the end of the 60s, that was the end of the dream right there. So, in a way, the 70s did have a sort of darker beginning to it. And then in the 70s, there was all the strikes, rubbish piling up on the streets. There was all sorts of stuff. And yet people now get in touch with me and say, such wonderful times. It was the first kiss, first boyfriend, first girlfriend, and I felt so free. Yeah, there was a great sense of freedom and optimism, despite all the social unrest that was going on in the 70s.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when you look back at stories from the 60s, everything is fluffy and the colours seem a little bit brighter. But then when you get into 70s newsreel, everything's grainy and dark and cloudy and miserable. But the music was actually pretty decent.
Yeah, and then sort of rock got a little bit pompous, with record companies who would only sign groups that sounded like the group that already was successful. And they would spend £100,000 marketing a new band. So it became very difficult for new groups that were slightly different to break through. And that's really what punk was all about. It sort of kicked away all that grandiosity and stuff. And it was like back in the days of the Beatles. And I remember seeing the Beatles live in a ballroom in Birmingham, the Plaza Ballroom, never forget, one of the greatest concerts I've ever been to. But the overriding thing was, here's four ordinary guys, interesting hairstyles, girls going absolutely bananas, the energy fantastic, sweat dripping down the walls. But they were just kind of four ordinary blokes.
Yeah.
And they were just, the music gave them such freedom. And the same thing happened really with punk rock.
Some people call me the space cowboy.
That's a great song, Steve Miller and The Joker, which Johnnie says his wife Tiggy used to dedicate to him. Now, his penultimate song is the beautiful ballad by Cyndi Lauper, Time After Time. Now, Johnnie, compared to everything else that you've chosen, that's a kind of a modern song from Cyndi Lauper. But Time After Time, why have you picked that?
Well, it's very special. 20 years ago, I got married to a woman called Tiggy. He was the most amazing woman I'd ever met. Fantastic personality, wonderful sense of humour, great laughter. And we got married, and then we came back from honeymoon in India, and I was diagnosed with cancer. And I really felt so awful about that. I remember I came out the clinic after the diagnosis. I said, I'm so sorry, Tiggs, I felt, when you make the vows for better or for worse, you don't expect the worst to come within about 2 months of your wedding. And so she was incredibly supportive. And we got friendly with Terry Wogan and Paulie Walters, who was his producer back then. And I didn't know, but Tiggy sent an email to Paul Walters. Could you ask Terry to play this Cyndi Lauper record for Johnnie? And it was her way of saying, I'll help look after you. And we had a code word for each other, which we let Terry know about. So Terry played it the next day. I heard it on the radio. Oh. So that always means an awful lot to me, though.
And you got Tiggy, she's here today with you.
Yeah.
Which is lovely, fantastic. So before we play your last track, The New Radicals, let's talk about Specialist Week on Radio 2, where we get people like yourself to come in and play tunes that you love from certain genres, shall we say.
Well, a lovely thing about my job at the moment is, in a way, I remember saying to a BBC producer, it's kind of sad I can't play any new music. I'm the curator of the 70s Museum. Johnnie, he goes, it is new music to young people who are interested in 70s. It's new music to them. And then, of course, I have the Friday Night Rock Show, which is a great chance to play some real good rock on a Friday night at 11.
You said there that you do the rock show. What can we expect from that? Is it exactly what it says on the tin?
Yeah, and the great thing is, I think we mix up the old and the new. So we'll play a track from an album that came out in 1982 together with a brand new release. And then we have a thing called Rock God, where we get an artist every week to pick the person who's influenced him the most. That's a lovely feature. Another one is This Week in Rock. We look back over the years at significant events that happened this week in years gone by. And people like the mix. The only thing they don't like about it is it only lasts for an hour.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. There's so much great music to choose from.
Yeah, they all say this show reminds me of the Radio 1 rock show with Tommy Vance, who did a brilliant job on it. And then it was 2 hours long. So we're constantly hoping that we'll get an extra hour one day.
Well, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And then this one, when I saw the list, Johnny, I didn't expect this. The New Radicals, You Get What You Give.
I seem to have 7-year periods with the BBC. I did 7 years at Radio 1, then I went to America, and then I did 7 years doing Drive Time, where Sally Bozeman and I had developed a bit of an act together. I remember when I first started, I took over from John Dunn, who was a much respected and straight and proper broadcaster, who pre-recorded all his interviews. Everything was very organised, and I come in with this sort of devil-may-care attitude of, I don't know what we're going to play next, we'll think of something.
That sounds familiar, team, doesn't it?
Always best to go with the spontaneity and the feeling of the moment, I think. And so Jim Moyer, who's boss of Radio 2 after I did my first show, because he told me before I did it, he said, don't give it the full Johnny Walker, he said, to start. He said, just pretend you're John Dunn. I mean, what's the point of that? So anyway, I did my first show, bumped into him in the building the next day, and he goes, Johnny, he said, it's all right, you give it the full Johnny Walker, it's fine. And he said, that's for Sally Bozeman. He said, play the long game on that one, son. I think it was like, he thought it was a bit like the famous Nescafe advertisement.
Yeah.
Will they, won't they? Poor old Tiggs. We're backstage at the Hammersmith Odeon after a James Taylor concert. Sally Bozeman's a huge fan. I'm walking by with Tiggy, and a Radio 1 person was there. Hey, Johnny, is that Sally Bozeman with you? And Tiggy goes, no, it's not. I'm younger than her. So Sally and I used to do these on-air arguments. So people thought we were married. So it was a lot of fun. But I played some great music there, and we had a really big audience. And Jim Moyer was fantastic in marketing the show. He bought a load of space on London buses. I remember I got my son Sam in the car, and I turned into Regent Street, and he goes, oh no, Dad, look. I said, what is it? And we're behind a bus, and there's my mugshot on the back of this bus. So yeah, there were 7 wonderful years doing Drive Time, and the record I've chosen from that sort of period is just one that has great energy. In a way, it's about karma. You get what you give, and a really great record.
Johnny, it's been a fabulous week. It's been a real privilege for me, and I mean this because some people say this a lot and it kind of dilutes it a little bit, but a real privilege and an honour to sit opposite you and listen to you give us your 10 tracks of the week, throughout the week, Monday to Friday. It's been a joy. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's been very nice to be your guest, and thanks for asking.